In Santorini, there's a little baby island called Ammoudi Bay, or well, that area over there is called Ammoudi Bay, right?
Yeah, and then it has a jetty that sticks out like a rock formation off of the bay. So there's restaurants and cute little beaches, and then there's the rock that we went to cliff jump.
And of course, you were the one that found this, doing all your research on what to do in Santorini. It was a very long day the day before, so we decided to take it easy and just do one thing, and that was to go down to Ammoudi Bay. That is over on the side of the island where Ia is, right?
Yes, which is where we stayed. That was where our Airbnb was at. And that's the cute little village. It's where we've got the blue domes and all of the white painted stone houses.
Yeah, when you think of the famous Santorini, you think of the blue domes. Those. On our way to Ammoudi Bay, we were heading that direction, and we decided to get lunch before we went out.
We pretty much just walked through the village until we saw the blue domes. And then we just turned left into a restaurant, and they took us out on the patio, and we could see the blue domes from where we sat at our table.
We sat at a table that was on like the patio area that looked out over the ocean.
Yeah, it's on the cliff face.
Yeah.
So we can see the ocean, and we can see Ammoudi Bay from our table. That was when I first started to get nervous, because while we were sitting there, I think we had burgers at lunch, and we could see Ammoudi Bay looked so small from that vantage point, but then we saw people go up and they looked so tiny.
Yeah, like ants.
And then it looked like they fell for a little bit longer than I had anticipated.
Yeah.
And so as we were finishing up dinner, I think that was when I was getting nervous. You weren't nervous.
No, I was super excited. I thought it was going to be so fun, and that was one of the things that I was looking forward to the most in Santorini. So after we were done with lunch, we headed back out, continued to walk through the shops. There are so many shops out there. Every 5 feet as you're walking through Ia is just lined with shops. Once we get past that area, then we get to the steep steps going down towards Ammoudi Bay, because where we were staying at was much higher up on the cliff face, and then to get down to Ammoudi Bay you have to walk all the way down to basically the bottom of the island.
Yeah, sea level.
Yeah, and we both wore sandals, right?
Yeah, we had chacos on.
Yeah, and
because we thought that would be most opportune for cliff jumping.
Yeah, and getting into the water, and it was a good idea, but mine were brand new. And so I hadn't worn them in very well or much. So as we're walking down, I'm starting to get blisters because it was like a long walk down. I don't want to forget that while we're walking down, even though it was a brutal walk, it was the most beautiful walk. I mean, we're looking out into the ocean.
It was so pretty. I didn't want to be insensitive because you were struggling with blisters. I'm like, I had a great walk. I loved the walk down. It was beautiful. Yeah. I'm on my honeymoon. It was just great. And then you were in a little bit of pain.
It was fine. It wasn't that bad. It actually didn't get that bad until later on. But it was super cool because we're walking down, and then as we're walking down, if you turn around, you can see all of like the hotels and the buildings and the restaurants just stacked upon each other on the kind of like the cliff face. It's so beautiful, and everything there, all the buildings there are white, or the majority of the buildings there are white, and it's so beautiful.
It is. I love the uniformity.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about that, but it's very pleasing.
So then we finally get down to the bottom, and there's a bunch of restaurants down there, and I love Santorini, but there were areas where it wasn't like clearly demarcated to where to go. We get down to that area, and to our left, which is where we think we need to turn to get down to the beach area, is a restaurant. And so I was like, oh shoot, we had a dead end. And then we asked someone at the restaurant, and they're like, oh no, you just have to walk through the restaurant.
The hostess told us, just go ahead through, it's right through here. And we were like, through the restaurant? And she said, yeah,
the only way to get to Ammoudi Bay is to walk through a restaurant. So we walk through, and then when we get on the other side, we still have a little ways to go. Pretty rocky area down there. And we walk down a little ways, and we turn to the left, and there's the only way you can get to Ammoudi Bay. I feel like they did this on purpose. They like American Ninja Warrior it, where it's like You only get here if you pass these obstacles. But there was
It was like walking the plank.
a balance beam.
Yeah.
And it was a little thicker than a balance beam. It was probably about a foot wide. But when you're walking across and there's only that path and what's underneath you is just rock. And it wasn't like a far drop. But if you fell, that was going to hurt.
Yeah.
And then finally we got there. It's not like a beach like you would think of normal beach, sand and all that stuff. It's all rock. It's all that like volcanic rock. It's beautiful.
There were people laying out. I don't know if it's a place I would go to hang out and just lay for an extended period of time, but some people were doing that.
Yeah, we were there for one reason, and that was to get in and to go jump off that cliff. So we got down there. We were straight to it. We saw there was this dog that was swimming in the water. He was adorable. He was so friendly, and he kept jumping in the water, and he was there with his owner, and they were just hanging out. But then we finally decided to get in. I get down there, and there's not an easy way in. You kind of have to you have your butt on a rock, and you kind of have to jump out and
to clear the rocks that are right in front of you.
Yeah, I went ahead and I went first, and it was cold. The weather outside was probably, what was the weather like when we were
75, 80?
Yeah, but because it was in May, everyone had told us, yeah, it's getting warmer outside, but the water is still cold from the winter. Jump into the water, and I think it's high 50s. And so I jumped out there and I was like, oh, yeah, this is cold.
When I saw your reaction, I knew it was going to be really, really tough for me.
Well, and that's what I was thinking too, is I was like, I deal with cold a little better than you do.
Quite a bit better than I do.
I saw you contemplating for a minute, sitting up on that rock like, ready?
Ooh, that's chilly. Yeah, no, I knew I was getting in. I just didn't know how long it was going to take me and how much I was going to have to psych myself up to do it.
Yeah.
But you were in, you were ready to go. There were a couple other people that were in there swimming and heading towards the rock. It's like, okay, all these people can do it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
We finally get into the water, and then once you are fully submerged and get out there, it actually, after 30 seconds, you kind of get used to it. A little bit. It's still cold.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was not super comfortable the whole time we were in the water, but the adrenaline and the anticipation of the cliff jump helped.
Yeah.
Because as soon as we got there and we could actually see the rock, that's really the main thing I was focused on.
Then you have to swim over to that area to where the cliff is, where that little standalone island is. During that swim, were you having like second thoughts?
No. I feel like with every step we took closer to it, I felt more and more resolved, because now I've already gotten in the freezing cold water, which is not really my thing. I don't love. And now that we're swimming out there, I was like, I'm not going to swim out to this rock and then not do it.
Yeah. As we're swimming out, you can look down below. I mean, it was pretty deep down, but there were areas where there was one area where it was about halfway to the cliff where I could stand on the rock and I would be out of the water. It was a little nerve-wracking to see that some rocks were closer to the surface. Now, it was not super close.
Right, but they looked the same, though.
Yeah.
From surface level, those rocks, because the water is so clear, those rocks look just as close as the ones that are 10, 20 meters down.
We finally get over there. Then it takes a second for us to pull each other up onto the rock, but we finally get up there.
Yeah, we tag teamed it a little bit.
Yeah. And then once we head up there, there's like this little, almost like church looking, I don't know, it almost looks like a baby church up there. And as we're walking towards the edge, there's a couple that went up there, looked out over the edge, and turned around and they're like, no.
Dipped.
So we get up there, and at first we were both going to jump off together.
Yeah, I had it in my mind, like the honeymoon cliff jump. We were going to be holding hands, and it was just going to be a great magical moment. And then instead, I sacrificed you over the edge of the cliff so that I could watch and make sure that you were going to survive before I went.
Yeah, and we both looked out over the edge. It's a lot higher than it looks. Because even from video, it doesn't even look all that high, but once you get up there and you look down, it's pretty high.
It is.
As we're up there looking down, there are different shades in the water, and so you're trying to decide where is the best part to jump out to. Then I decide I'm gonna go ahead and go for it. I looked out over the edge one more time, and then I just went for it. And as you can see, when I jumped over the edge, I didn't have my hand on my hat. And when I hit the water, I have this mindset of like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I downplay everything to help not psych myself out.
It keeps me calm as well.
Yeah, it keeps me calm. And so I'm like, it's not that big of a deal, blah, blah, blah. Then I jump over the edge. It's a little bit of a drop. And then once I hit the water, like I said, I didn't take it as seriously as maybe I should have. It was pretty jarring. And I hit the water and I was like, oh. You
looked disoriented enough when you came up that told me everything I needed to know.
Yeah. And my hat went fly. As soon as I hit the water, my hat just goes. And I was like, well, I guess maybe I just lost my hat. I don't know. Luckily, I was able to grab it. But it was exhilarating and it felt good. And I was like, okay, I got to go one more time. That was a lot of fun. So then I'm down there. At that point, I didn't know if you had officially decided if you wanted to jump.
Oh, yeah, I was going. I could see where the bubbles were, where you had entered, and you made it out fine.
Yeah.
So that was my target.
Okay, perfect.
My landing pad.
Because then I asked you, I was like, oh, are you going? And you were like, yeah. And I was like, sweet. So then I sat down there and watched you. Yeah! You handled it like a champ, and you came up. And there were a bunch of people watching us.
Yeah.
And they were like cheering for you. Like as soon as you jumped in, they cheered for you. And then you got up and you were so psyched. And that was so exciting. And I was like, okay, I got to go again. But you immediately, as soon as you came up, you're like, I'm not doing that again.
I'm not going again.
Okay.
I think that they were cheering because when we got up there, they saw me like clinging to the flagpole. And they probably thought I was going to bail out.
Like, she's not going.
And then when I did it, they were like, all right. Yeah.
Then you stayed down in the water, and I went up one more time and jumped off this time using both my hands to hold on to my hat. It was still jarring the second time. It didn't get like the butterflies didn't go away the second time. I was still having to psych myself out.
But the fear was a little bit less.
Yeah.
Because you knew you were going to make it.
For sure. Jumped out, landed, felt good, and we both had a moment to just kind of take it in. And it was so nice. So just the moment of looking around, you can see up on the side where all the buildings are in Santorini. It was just the perfect way to kind of end the day. And I know it wasn't the end of the day, but we kind of hung out in the water for a little bit, but then we grabbed our stuff, walked back. We were able to kind of reflect on how cool it was to jump off Ammoudi Bay.
Yeah, that made it a little bit easier to get up the side of the cliff.
Yeah. As we're walking back, there's this little town square area that's really cute. And there's just a great, not even like a nightlife. It was just later in the day and there's just the hustle and bustle. And luckily we went in May and it wasn't as busy. We've heard that during the summer, June, July, August, it gets really, really busy there. And there were times where we were walking through that area and it was pretty packed. But they just have a cool setup there, and there are Greek flags everywhere you look. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a blue and white theme.
Yeah.
There's a lot of blue and white.
Pretty consistently.
Yeah. And that was our day at Ammoudi Bay.
Ammoudi Bay. I like that. I like what you did there. Yeah.